Yamandu Marung, which is native to the East Coast nations for Australia. So it's the East Coast nations of Australia, all right? So I don't want to be getting mixed up with the West Siders. You know, the West Siders might come at me with something else, so we'll get that out there too for them. So, all right. So please feel welcome. Tansi, Buju, Kia ora. Yat we already went through that one. Yawe Scano, Sagoli. Anybody else got any other greetings for me? Please come on up here and gift me when you get a chance. Scold me if you need to. I told you before yesterday, slap me, then tell me. Okay, so the Wichita Confederated Tribes of Oklahoma? Affiliated tribes, excuse me. Ashida Sheetsock. Ashida Sheetsock. Okay, so Nyawe. And this is one that I should have known, but I do apologize for that, and Nyawe for coming up, bringing it to my attention again. The Cherokee Nation, their greeting is Osio. So Osio is a way you can say hello to a Cherokee person. So proper way to introduce yourself. And that's the Eastern Band as well, and all the other nations within the Cherokee Nation. I know that that is something that is a common thread, so good to hear that and good to be taught. So Nyawe for everybody who's been sharing with me. All right. Pija Awamua. That's a Walker River Paiute tribe, a.k.a. the Agai Dakuta, and that means the trout eaters. So the Paiute people are known to be people, they're known by what they eat, coming from the great Hidatsa Nation, the MHA Nation. Way to say good morning to you is Gira, Gute, Tigits. All right, I'm getting there. All right, so that's a good way to say good morning to somebody. Okay, here we go, sorry. So I gotta keep the show rolling here, but I do want to acknowledge my relatives from the New Mexico Santo Domingo Pueblo, and they gifted me with the welcoming Coetzi Opa, and then also Amedewa Opa. So, and that's from the Santo Domingo, and I understand that the Zia Nation is here as well. So let me get rolling here. I'm a little bit behind schedule. I know that Dara's here, trying to get me going here a little bit more. But our first presenter this morning, his name is Mr. Joe Williams. He's presenting on A Better Now. Joe is an adjunct professor and a founder of Our Way Academy. So bear with me for a moment. I want to read a little bit of this guy's bio here because it's amazing. And you'll understand why I was thinking that he might need a walk-up music. So he's of the Wiradjuri tribe, or the Wolgalu Nation, First Nations Aboriginal man of Australia. Having lived a portion of his life as a professional athlete, Joe played in the National Rugby League before switching to boxing. In 2009, as a boxer, Joe was a two-time WBF World Junior Welterweight and WBC Asia Continental Champion. I mean, come on. It's pretty amazing. Although forging a successful professional sporting career, Joe battled the majority of his life with crippling mental health issues. So that's real. In 2014, Joe founded the mental health and well-being organization, The Enemy Within. In 2017, Joe was named as the finalist for the Courage Award in the National Indigenous Human Rights Award. In 2018, awarded the Suicide Prevention Australia Life Award. In 2019, Joe was awarded the Australia's highest honor in the mental health field, announced as a co-winner of the National Mental Health Prize. In 2023, Joe founded the Our Way Academy, Ltd., working in schools to create a better now for First Nations young people. Our Way Academy creates a culturally responsive environment for students to learn and thrive through belonging, values, and behaviors. Joe is currently studying as a PhD in Indigenous Knowledges at the University of Melbourne, Australia.
That took me straight back. I was talking to Clayton last night at dinner, and we were standing there and posing for a photo, and we're like, it's like that old-time boxing thing. Clayton and I met back in 2016 with this conference back in Aotearoa. And we met, and Sister Nikki introduced us as former boxers, and the love of sport. And it's like an automatic thing. Whenever we pose for a photo, we've got to stand there like this. Those days are long gone, thankfully, and I've got a few scars around the old head to note that. thank you so much, and welcome to everyone who's here. The last few days has been absolutely stunning, right? The last few days, I think for me, as an individual, as a man from the lands now known as Australia, it probably highlights how far we've got to go. It probably highlights that we are behind some ways when it comes to the cultural connection, the revitalisation, the reclamation of who we are. And we can sit there and be disappointed, right? We can sit there and be disappointed and sad and upset, or we can sit there and go, wow, look where we're headed. Because the nations around the world, and I've said it from the jump since I've been working internationally in this space, our native and Indigenous brothers and sisters across the ways are really leading in this space. So I can sit back and go, we have lost so much, or I can sit back and go, look where we're headed. The future looks bright, thanks to the people in this room with a revitalisation of who you are. I'm thankful to be here, grateful to be here. As mentioned in my bio, I always get a little bit awkward about bios because they sit there and they talk about all these things, you know, as a sports person, all that. By all means, I'm extremely proud of that, but it's also somebody who I was. Don't mistake me and try and bail me up outside to punch on, because it's not who I am anymore. And I'm really grateful that I'm now moved on to a different part of my life where, and I'll talk about it a little bit today, a different part of my life where I honestly believe that for many years I was lost. I was a lost little boy. I was a scared little boy. I was an angry little boy. But I'm grateful that I've now found my path. The old people put me on my path. In our language, the Wiradjuri language, I'll say, Dalan niani dumbara nyamara niani gingu mujgan marabayala. I show my respect to the old ones, the ones who aren't here anymore, but also the ones who are with us, not in human form. The old birds, the old trees, the waterways, everything that encompasses who we are. Because the one thing I noticed in working internationally with Indigenous peoples over many years, we are the same people. We are the same people from different lands. We talk about the same values, the same stories, our love for mother, the respect for the sky people, the respect in who we are collectively. I'm really lucky that my job for a long time was sport. You know, all my life I wanted to be a sports person. I played for a club now owned by international actor Russell Crowe, and the South Sydney Rabbitohs. And the Rabbitohs are a really well-known club in Australia, and who struggled, but were particularly the Aboriginal club, because it was based in an Aboriginal area. It was a very low socioeconomic area, and it's a club steeped in pride now. And Russell come and took over and rejuvenated that club, and they've had some great success. Shout out to our brothers and sisters in Aotearoa. I say up the Waz, the Warriors. Don't let anyone who's a Rabbitohs fan hear me say that back home. I don't transfer that, right? And I've been lucky that my whole life has been sport. You know, so I walk into places, and I walk into schools, and I walk into communities, and they knew me as a sports person. But then I'm really lucky that now that I've been working in the mental health and trauma field for a long time, is that a lot of people don't know me as a sports person. So then when I talk about it and I show photos, like, wow, that's you? You don't have grey hair. But the middle picture is probably the most important, is that when we're involved in professional sport, you know, I'll say this openly and publicly, and I haven't said it a lot of times, is that we all want our young kids to be these elite sports people. And I had a conversation with a brother the other night was saying that, you know, sport's the gateway. Sport's the ticket out of our communities a lot of the time. And I understand that and I respect that. And sport is a real way for our kids to connect to something bigger that they want to do. But I've got to be honest. In the 10 years that I was a professional sports person involved in the NRL system, was the most disconnected I've ever been. It was the most disconnected I've ever been because it wasn't truly authentically me. It was a kid who was lost, who grew up in a small town that was thrust into the city with all this money and not knowing what to do, and the profile that comes with that and the ego that comes with that. And then all of a sudden, you know, you're known in a small local country town, but then you go to this big city and you can disappear for days and no one knows who you are. But then all of a sudden you start to get some pride, some profile and some spotlight, and people start asking you for autographs and get your photo. It takes your ego to another place. And it's not authentically who we are. In the reconnection of who I've been as an Aboriginal man, you know, I've always known that I was an Aboriginal man, always. It was proudly spoken about in our family. Always knew who I was, always knew who my families were, and always knew where we come from. But I also was a kid who was probably too black to be white, but also too white to be black. Sort of didn't fit in either world. So I struggled with that. I struggled with who I was, with my identity of who I was, even as a sports person. That last line's it's the most important one. All the bios are good, but now I'm lucky to be living my purpose. And a big part of living my purpose was learning how to be a dad. Learning how to be a dad, because for so long, one of the most confronting things I realized during the pandemic when the world stopped, because I've been so busy for so many years, was that I'd been a father for 16 years and a dad for 2. The time that I was home, I was like going, oh my God, this is what it's like. And I reckon, again, it was a gift from the old people. When I say the old people, that's our ancestors. It was a gift from the old people, and I say this with respect, that my partner got really sick. And like, don't sit there and say, oh my God, who is this guy? But she got really unwell, and she was forced to go to hospital, which threw me in the deep end to be a dad. And I was like waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning when my little terror, Frankie, was chomping on the bit to be awake, and then I had to get everyone breakfast, and I'd organise the Zoom meetings, and then I'd organise the people to go down, the kids to go have their afternoon nap, and then I'd have to do more meetings, and then organise things for dinner, and then I'd cook dinner, and then I'd wash up and I'd clean up, and then I'd have to clean everyone's clothes from the week, and then put the kids to bed, and then I was like, oh my God, is this what it's like? I didn't sign up for this, but I realised as well is that Courtney had been doing this for years and years and years without even me knowing. So it gave me so much gratitude that I had an opportunity to be a dad, because my life of kids, and my kids there, and they all look very different, right? Is that I'm very extremely fortunate to have 5 beautiful children from 3 separate relationships. And those relationships, all 3 of them, taught me a hell of a lot about myself. I was married and with my 2 oldest children, and then I was divorced, and then repartnered, and I had another little child, and then, you know, we talk about kids fighting for identity. Have a look at the whitest kid in the room with red hair. He's going to stand up and say that he's proud to be Aboriginal, and everyone's going to question him. But that's why he's going to be strong, because he's going to know who he is. And then I moved overseas to play football in France, and then I moved back to Australia, separated again, and then I met the most important person in my life, Courtney. who has taught me so much about me without even saying it. Taught me so much about me without even understanding what she's doing. And I talk about the enemy within. For so long, I lived with this demon inside my head. I talk about my life in two parts, right? Two very separate paths that both led me to exactly where I am today. The first one, at the age of 13, I had 5 NRL clubs. So the NRL, for those who don't know, is one of the national competition. I can't, there's too many people from Australia here, so I can't say it's the leading competition in Australia, because we all know that AFL is a lot bigger and better. But the NRL is one of the national sports competitions in Australia. And there were 5 NRL clubs coming and knocking on mum and dad's door. And not ringing us. Remember the whole old home telephones? You guys have that out here where everyone sat around the phone and listened to who was on there? All these clubs were ringing up mum and dad, and they were saying, we'll give him this, and this is what we'll do, and this is how much money we'll give, and all of this. 13 years of age, and I'm going, wow, this is incredible. And mum and dad were smart, because my dad played in those systems. Mum and dad said, we don't care about how much money you promise or the fame or profile that you promise our boy. What we care about the most is our boy's education. So the very first contract that I signed was the least amount of money in value, but has created the most amount of value in my life. It paid for my entire schooling. My entire schooling, where mum and dad had the insight to see that if you have an education also in the white world, then you can set yourself up in that world. You get a good education, you get a good job, you get financially rewarded, you can look after your kids. Now, I know that there's similarities around the world with our peoples, but our peoples back home, there's a massive amount of our people, the large majority of our people that live below the poverty line. So for me, that was important. My schooling, that helped me set up for me to be who I am now and to be able to say long words and talk in front of crowds like you. The other thing that happened to me at the age of around about 13 is I had a massive concussion that knocked me completely out of it. And the research is well known about concussions now. And on the back of that first concussion, it started a conversation inside my head. A conversation that told me I wasn't good enough, that I'd never amount to anything, and that I shouldn't be here anymore. At the age of 13, I had this voice at me every single day. You don't belong. You're not good enough. And progressively got worse to plant thoughts, plans, and ideas to not be here any longer. The only way that I could silence what was going on inside my head, how do you reckon? Drink as much as I possibly could. Now, yeah, we have mischievous young people and the young teens that get into trouble. But I was running away from this. I was also playing first grade football, like high-level football, against men at a very young age. So my first game in the Opens League at 13 as well. So at 13 years of age, I was playing against men. So every day against men. And rugby league today isn't what it was like, it's getting longer now, 25 years ago. It wasn't particularly faster or fitter. It was a hell of a lot dirtier though. So the head knocks and the initiation process, let's see if he's tough enough to be out here. So I copped all sorts of head shots, late shots, all of that. Which kept that noise inside my head getting louder and louder and louder. When the noise was getting louder, the more drink that I get. 17, 18-year-old, I moved down to Sydney to chase my dreams to play in the NRL. Now, Sydney's the town that doesn't sleep. Not only was there alcohol, now I found recreational drugs, and I was just doing as much as I could to escape, to run away from what was happening inside my head. I said to myself, all of these challenges that are happening inside my head, there's one common theme. There was fights in the street, poor form on the footy field, arguments at home, challenges with my relationships. The one thing that was in common with all of it was alcohol and drugs. I said to myself, if I can get rid of this stuff, maybe I'll be able to save my life, my career, and get myself back on track. I'm now fortunate that I can stand here in front of you today, 18 years without any alcohol or substance. And there's so many people in our communities that are just running away from what's happening with their life through alcohol and substances. The escape. Gabor Mate talks about addicts don't get addicted to the substance, they get addicted to the relief that the substance gives them. For people that we know that struggle with substance, we know how true that statement is. Now, when I gave away alcohol and drugs, I also lost interest in playing rugby league anymore. The only thing I had in common with my teammates was playing and partying. Now, I wasn't partying anymore. I wasn't particularly enjoying football anymore, so I walked away from rugby league. I walked away from rugby league and I walked into a boxing gym. Now, I walked into a boxing gym not to learn how to fight people. I walked into a boxing gym because the harder I worked physically, the stronger I became mentally. And the harder I worked, it started to silence what was happening here. So I almost got addicted to that process as well. Now, my coach, he was quite a well-known coach in Australia. For those who know boxing, know a guy called Johnny Lewis, who's a trainer in the International Hall of Fame. Johnny said, "You go all right at this stuff. How about we throw you in for a fight?" And as a rugby league player, I didn't like the sight of my own shadow some days, so I wasn't particularly in a rush to get punched in the mouth. But boxing taught me so much about me. Boxing taught me that when I had to dive deep within myself, and I had to learn how to fight what was happening, because that voice, it was still talking to me. When I had to dive deep within, I started to learn how to fight back. Not physically, but every time mentally, I was just learning how to just creep that one step after another. Now, the ups and downs of life, diagnosed with bipolar disorder, separation from my marriage, around some really challenging times in my life, I'd repartnered, had another child, I'd separated again, and I was going, what the heck is wrong with these women? This is where I start going. I realized that everyone that I was pointing the finger at, there was 3 fingers pointing back at me. I had to look at what I was doing. I got clean and sober. I started boxing. The challenges of up and downs of relationships come to the toughest day of my life. Now I talk about some pretty amazing days and experiences that I've had. But without doubt, the most challenging experience in my life that I've ever had. And I won't go into it. We're not here for that. But it was a day I tried everything within the power of my 2 hands to not be standing in front of you. Something bigger than me kept me here. Something bigger than me kept me here, because if I had it my way, I wouldn't be standing here. They talk about the 2 most important days of your life. There's little Joe. The 2 most important days of your life, the day you're born, and then the day you find out why you're born. We've got so many people on the treadmill, the hamster wheel of life, rolling around through life aimlessly, not knowing their purpose. There's a brilliant quote that says, so many people die at 25. There's graveyards with people filled with people who die at 25 but get buried at 75. Let's not be one of those people. On the back of that most challenging day of my life, I made a promise to myself that every day I wake up, I'm going to make a positive impact on someone's life. I'm going to make a positive impact on someone's life, and I'm going to do my best to recognize when somebody's doing it challenging, to go up to them and speak to them. Because I just come off, I was playing in the NRL, seeing it on TV every week, signing autographs, eating in restaurants for free, all of that stuff, like as a sports person in Australia. And then I went to professional boxing and things were going okay with that. And then the challenges of what happened to me started to normalize it with people. wow, if this guy can talk about it, maybe we can talk about the challenges I go through as well. Now, some of the challenges that we're going through were very evident in our communities. And the biggest thing that came out of coming public with the story of what I was going through for a long time was the amount of people that were coming up to me going, Joe, you just put words to everything that I feel. And we started to connect, and we started to converse, and we started to hug each other and cry with each other. And hold space for people who are struggling with pain. Now I started working around communities, and prior to the pandemic, I was on the road 300 plus days of the year in hundreds of communities around Australia. Going from one place to the next, flying, going to sleep, delivering sessions all day in schools, in workplaces, going to the next, in sports clubs, all of that stuff, going to the next. 300 plus days of the year, and then the pandemic happened, and it was the greatest gift of my life. I say that with respect because I understand that the pandemic and the shutdowns and the lockdowns of communities was a very challenging time and place for people. But for me, it was the greatest gift of my life. I noticed one thing, and for people who follow me on social media, on my Instagram, you'll understand exactly who I'm talking about when I talk about my daughter, Frankie. I always thought that my oldest daughter was challenging, right? So I always blamed her mother. Oh, she's like a mother. She's so much like a mother. She's fiery like a mother, all of that sort of thing. And then my partner now is the most gentle thing in the entire world. But Frankie's more fiery than Phoenix. Joe, there's only one thing in common with both girls. Maybe Frankie gets it from you. That's my little Frankie there, who is doing the pose of the emu, the Dinawan. And the emu and the Dinawan is a very important story, very important animal in our culture, and there's stories across our country that talks to it. But out of the pandemic and the hundreds of communities around Australia, I said, I need to get back and stay with my family more. I need to create 100 Joes who can go out into communities. So I founded Our Way Academy. Because we're doing things our way. Because for 250 years, and the millions of dollars that go into our communities, it isn't working. I was the keynote at the National Australian Suicide Prevention Conference, and I got up there, and it worked out perfectly, right? This major sponsor got up and said, we've committed this much money, and this is what we're doing, and things are fantastic in this space. Both sides of government got up and said, we've got bipartisan support, we're both in agreement with how things should be, and everything's great, and we're doing things together to curb the suicides and mental health rates in Australia. And then the CEO gets up and goes, everything's going fantastic and everything's going great. I get up as the keynote and say, hold on to your seats, I'm about to tell you the truth. I said, if there's more money in mental health than there ever has been, there's more awareness, there's more education, there's more organisations, there's more advocates, there's more people talking about mental health. The conversation of mental health, the stigma that is mental health for a long time, that's now gone. People are talking about it. People are starting to build businesses out of this stuff. I said, if there's more money in mental health, there's more organisations, there's more people doing what we need to do in communities, then why the hell are we dying more? It's because the organisations who have funded the millions and millions of dollars to work with our people don't know who the hell we are, don't know what the hell to do. They need to get out of the way so our people can help our people. You can understand I wasn't invited back the next year. But I've been in this space for over a decade now. And I'm not here to make people comfortable. Because our people, your people, we die more than anyone else in the world. And then on the back of that conference in Aotearoa, the narrative in my mind changed. The narrative in my mind changed that we weren't dying from mental health and mental illness. We were dying collectively as people from the impacts of colonisation. The forced removal of people, the forced removal of our cultures, the forced removal of not having language, the forced change of behaviours. Now, there's more money in the Aboriginal sector to what they call in Australia close the gap of life expectancy. There's more money in Australia in close the gap than there ever has been. But report after report, year after year, the results are going backwards. It's because they need to get out of the way. We need to do things our way. I've got a short little video that talks about a better now, because everyone goes, we got to do this for the future, and this is what we got to do in the future, and we're doing this, and we're impacting, and we're investing this much money for our future. But we got to create a better now, right now. And that's what we're doing with our academy, helping young people with values, behaviours to create a better now. It's funny, everything has meaning in our world. Even that song talks about Father Emu guiding the young ones. That song talks about young ones who are lost, young ones who are hurt, young ones who are angry. Let's reflect a little. Is that what's happening in our communities? Our communities, everyone says, the adults, we jump on the pedestal, right? That's what we do. Oh, those kids, they wouldn't understand what it was like, and they don't. And I say that with the most respect. But we also don't understand what it's like for our kids. In this digital world that our kids are living in, there is so much chaos that is directly contributing to how we are behaving. Now, the deep dive I went into with trauma and understanding trauma, right down to the mechanics of the brain and how it all works and how we build coping strategies throughout these chemical processes that happen in our brain. When we look and understand about it, when we know it in depth, every behavior is there for a reason. We need to look at it from a completely different angle and not band-aid the behaviours, but start to go back and have a look at where the behaviours start. So a lot of my work was with adults and talking about the challenges of what we're having in our communities, which is very real and needed. But the work I've dedicated myself now is about our babies, our young ones, and making sure that if our babies don't have leadership now, then our babies become the leaders of tomorrow. And leadership is a title, right? But we need to start looking at leadership as an action. And we do that by creating a better now. And there's so many people in our communities that are challenged by their identity. They're trying to be something that they're not. All communities around the world, the one thing that challenges people the most is our own authenticity. We're pretending to be something that we're not. We're living a world that has a false identity with no connection. We are the most disconnected that we have ever been since the start of human existence. Right now. And with forced removals, with Father Dinawan not being there anymore, that old man Emu, our kids are walking around with no belonging. In many of our communities, in many of our families, we don't belong. Now, for people who have been here and documented as the oldest existence of humankind on the planet, communities for thousands of years were a place of safety, a place of belonging, a place of connection. Now, I challenge people, right? I challenge people's perspectives. You get that. You picked that up already. But I invite people to think differently. When we're trying to prevent this thing called suicide that we're all crippled with in our communities, we need to understand, and I say this with respect, suicide, the end result is a behaviour. We need to take a step back from that behaviour and look at what's causing the behaviour. And without a doubt, there's things like substance, there's challenges with that, there's relationships. But even relationships, the substance issues that we have in our communities, they're all there to mask something. They're all there to bring us back to this warm hug that many of our young people haven't had. Now, that isn't a point the finger moment at parents. It's not. It's not a point the finger at moment at communities. It's a point the finger at moment at our societies and how we are raising kids. We're pushing kids out of our doors faster than we ever have. That old kangaroo, have a think about the old kangaroo. When it has its little baby Joey in its pouch, how long do you reckon until the baby Joey gets out of there? Until it's too big to fit anymore. It is nurtured, it is loved, it is cared for until it is ready to take that next journey. So many of our young people aren't ready and are roaming through this world lost, disconnected, not knowing who we are. The causal pathway to discomfort and pain in adults is birthed out of discomfort in babies. For thousands of years, our babies didn't touch the ground. Their feet didn't touch the ground. They were passed around in our village. They were looked after, they were loved, they were yearned for. Now we're pushing our kids out the door faster than we ever have. And our kids are being raised by other kids, their peers. There's another brilliant book by Gabor Mate that says, hold on to your kids. We need to recreate our village. Our village is the thing that we're missing, that is challenging our communities more than anything. Because our kids are finding bonds, connections, through toxic relationships, through toxic behaviours, all as a means to escape. Now, adversity, all right, adversity builds resilience as well. But too much adversity builds coping strategies. We need to lead and create environments that our young people don't want to escape from. Through our model behaviour as adults. Now we can sit back and say it's our responsibility to do that. As parents, as carers, as grandparents, it's our responsibility to do that. But more than anything, it's our obligation to do that. One of the leading neuroscientists in the world, Dr. Bruce Perry, wrote a brilliant book with Oprah called What Happened to You. And that book is a must for people to read because it changes the conversation of not what's wrong with us, not what's wrong with me, because that's the narrative we have, isn't it? That's the conversation that goes through our ears. Oh my God, what's wrong with me? Why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep feeling like this? What is wrong with me? It changes the narrative from what's wrong with us to what happened to us. And I understand for your communities, it happened 200 years or more before it did with us. the challenges that we learn through behaviours of adversity at a lot of times isn't particularly safe, warm and comforting for our younger people. You know, forming behaviours of addiction, bonds of relationships that aren't quite what we should be. Dr. Bruce Perry in that book, he says, how ironic, right? This is one of the leading neuroscientists in the world, right? Dr. Bruce Perry, brilliant author, great physician, great therapist in what he does. Some of his books are incredible. I suggest to read them. That one is my number one book that I always talk about what happened to you. And he states in that, how ironic that the cultures that our modern world has marginalised are the cultures with the very wisdom to heal our modern woes. Our people know what to do. They just got to get out of the way. I say it all the time. What we did worked. What we're doing now isn't working. We need to reclaim who we are. We need to reclaim our old ways. We need to start living the stories. We need to start living the values in which those stories are birthed from. As my way, I do something I've never done. As my way of commitment in front of my peers, the Indigenous leaders from across our world, I make the commitment by singing another song, Brother Jaden Kitchener, Dinawan Barge, which talks about that old man Dinawan, that emu, walking across country, and you'll notice that he stops. At one point the song changes and he turns back to the young people and he says, come on now, we're not finished. We got more learning. We got to go across country and keep learning. The problem is we think that we get to a point and we've stopped learning. I'm sure that elders in our room can testify that we never stop learning. Dinawan barge anena babago enengale walaba dinawan barge anena babago enengale walaba dinawan barge anena babago enengale walabaga Diana barge Diana dinawan barge anena babago enengale walabaga Dinawan barge anena babago enengale walaba dinawan barge anena babago enengale walaba dinawan barge anena babago enengale walabaga Diana barge Diana dinawan barge anena babago enengale walabaga Dinawan barge anena babago enengale walaba dinawan barge anena babago enengale walaba dinawan barge anena babago enengale walabaga Diana barge Diana dinawan barge anena babago enengale walabaga Mandango. Can I just say one thing?
Sure, please.
I want to give a shout out to my manager Mel, but a few months ago when we found out that I was the pleasure of one of these keynotes, I said to Mel, I want to do something different. I want to bring my mum. And my mum's here tonight. I understand that for those who lose loved ones to suicide, there can be a hell of a lot of questions. And sometimes we can blame ourselves. Parents, I spoke with a parent last night, and sometimes we can blame ourselves, and I've spoken to thousands of parents around the world who just wanted answers, and it wasn't anything that you did. It was just that people are struggling with immense pain, and the thousands and thousands of people that I've spoken to around the world that have thankfully, that have been fortunate enough to still be here to tell their story, it wasn't that they wanted to die in those moments. It's just they felt that they didn't have any other answer to end the pain. That's an important point. Please go easy on yourselves, and thanks so much.
Once again, making it tough on me, Joe, but appreciate you. So we want to welcome up Carlene Familo. She wants to present Joe with a gift from our committee. And once again, it is a Pendleton blanket representing the Turtle Island and also the Sky World. Yahweh Carlene, Yahweh Joe. Okay, so that concludes the morning session, the morning speaker now. So we're going to break out into the breakout rooms and things like that. We will move out into an orderly fashion, please. But, certainly take a look at your schedules. Make sure that everything that you were maybe anticipating is still there. Things have changed a little bit. I do also want to remind you all that there are also the activation rooms, so please utilize those if you need to.